And I was wondering about how sometimes when we're in distress and we're sort of bouncing around looking for some kind of altruistic support, some kind of selfless support without motive and without pushing us in a certain way, when we don't have that altruistic support and we know it, we feel it subconsciously, it could be one of the ways that the brain switches into a state of altruism, which I feel is part of the value system of bipolar. Even when that omnipolar consciousness is mixed in with ego elements, there is still this element that awakens that realizes we're all one, it's all one thing. And so if it is, there's just naturally altruism. So when we don't have that support and we're kind of down in the dumps, the brain can actually create its own altruism for itself and others and survive that way for at least a period of time. So in a way we become the savior and the saved. And it's partially because we realize that nobody cares in the moment. And I was thinking about the word thinking, and you can separate it out into thing and king. So things are king, and that's sort of like saying we value things and we value thinking. So, and thinking creates things by labeling them. So I wonder if we can say something like energizing instead of saying I'm thinking, which has obvious connotations, valuing thinking and opinions, and also separating things out into things, and separating those things from ourselves and thinking that that is of the utmost value. And it's also thinking that us as a thing is king and what we think is king. So I wonder if we can say I'm energizing. I'm energizing that I like dogs or something. So it actually has a different element. There's no separate energy. So if we're energizing something, we realize in a way implicitly that it's connected to other things. And we realize that we are creating that energy. It's not like this passive thing like my thoughts. It's this energy. And what is that energy going to do? And it implies related energies. And it also doesn't sound like my thinking versus your thinking. It's something that I'm energizing, and that is something I want, and someone could participate with that or not. It doesn't have to be a battle. And also we're energy, and if we're energizing, it's actually more in alignment with what we actually are and what we're doing and what the process actually is and does, as opposed to saying I'm thinking, when we're not just thoughts. And when we say I'm thinking, we identify with our thoughts and being our thoughts, when maybe we can identify with what we energize, and that could bring some more sanity to it. Or we could say I'm energy queen, and I'm just being silly because go from king to queen, even though that kind of word is an ing word, but maybe we can change it to EEN or something like Energine or energy queen. So that means that there's some feminine energy in there instead of the word king or the sound king. We are energy transforming itself. We're energy energizing itself. So if we say I'm energizing, and it also has a nice connotation in energy, the word energizing itself. We're energy creating itself. There's this fusion. Perception is fusion and order, and could using the word energizing actually create more sanity in perception, in that it's something that we're bringing into awareness and energizing, but it's not this thing. It's not this separate existence. And we're not a separate existence, creating more separation through our use of language. So I wonder if there is a field of language energetics and speaking as perception, or changing words to be in more alignment with perception and how we actually perceive, and not in alignment with thinking. And can we make the energy created by perception synergistic, and can we do this with language? And if we don't make it synergistic, we sort of pinch off into a separate reality, and that's what we do by the way we speak. And the thing about the word energize too, if I say I energize or I'm energizing, it's the energy in our eyes, the energy we create by what we see, and not just by what we think, because what we think is generally in terms of conflict, and when we say our thoughts, it's generally conflicting with other people. And Krishnamurti talks about thinking together. Well, can we energize together? Can we see something together and create energy by looking with our eyes, and then giving voice to that, which is energy creating language, which could be language energetics. So I've talked about epigenetics, epimimetics, endomimetics, epimimetics, whatever. Maybe there's language energetics or something to do with that. Changing the energy behind language to create more unity in our perceptions and ways of speaking and communicating. And I was thinking about how map consciousness, going into that altered state of trance consciousness or omnipolarity, is actually like a commercial break from this reality. It's a commercial in this show of reality that we're watching. It's kind of like an advertisement for another world. And just with advertising in this world, they're hoping that with their little ways of using images and words and sounds and music, that will take up a place in our brain. So when we think to go buy something, we'll buy that brand, or we'll do that thing, or we'll have that experience. And so in the same way, this map consciousness experience is like this commercial break, and we're living in that for a while, and it changes certain parts in our brain, so we can actually see those aspects of reality when we're moving through the so-called consensus world. And when we see those bits, we'll subconsciously move towards some of it. But I think that is actually interrupted, that process of seeing the commercial break of map consciousness, and then again regaining egocentric, me-centric consciousness, and then taking meds actually blocks this natural wave movement of sort of breaking some of the ego structures during that commercial break. It's like an ego break, and then we go back into the ego reality, and that commercial break helps to make salient some bits for later, or make us understand more. So if I see a commercial on TV for some kind of experience, and then I go experience it, I will actually remember what it's about, or I know kind of what it's about from the commercial. So in the same way, if I experience the commercial break of reality, the ego break of map consciousness, it's kind of a little bit of a introduction to that state of consciousness, if it does come back as an experience again, and it's easier to navigate. And my brain has been thinking a little bit more about word transformations, and I was thinking about tender consciousness, which could be seen as tend her consciousness, which could be seen as the female energy. So can we have tender consciousness? And it seems like the pathology is really in language, as it affects the way we see, and it affects the way we experience ourselves. So this is where that language energetics could be important. And through the self-dialogue, can I speak with myself in some of these ways that I've experimented with, though I don't really remember most of them, but can I apply that to harvesting my map consciousness and get the languaging in alignment the use of language and the words in alignment with that state. I remember when I had my bad psych ward experience last year, when people came to visit me, every single word sounded like nails on a chalkboard. It just sounded so, ugh. So I think there's something to that. And the way we use language and the words we use affects what we see as. So we're seeing as the me, but we can see as this energy that witnesses itself, as this energy that witnesses itself unfolding. And it's not just words, but how words participate with seeing and warp perception. And I talked a lot about that, how words, sound, image, light actually interferes with the pure energy coming in of perception. And that sound, image, and light actually narrows our vision down to like a pinhole point on the whole field of perception. And so we can't actually receive the whole impression and have a different algorithm calculate what is most necessary to arise in consciousness for us then to give voice to or not. It's interesting how after half an hour of talking to myself, I don't feel any anxiety. And maybe it's because I took that hawthorn and then I did take some amino acids, regular scheduled dose, as well as regular scheduled dose of hearty nutritionals. And I actually took 5 instead of 4 for my second dose of the day, just because I have this extra energy circulating and I feel like it could use some nutritional support. Or it could just be talking to myself, and I had something come to mind that perception doesn't have anxiety. So perception and action doesn't have anxiety. And anxiety is some kind of inaction from the past that's sort of built up, that we've carried forward to the present moment. So can that subside through perception and action, and in talking to oneself in a different way, in self-dialogue? I don't know. Maybe I'll have some new insights into this through talking myself out of the me. And I remember reading once that if you don't create your own system, you'll end up living according to other people's systems. Something like that. So for example, if I don't create a business or something, I'm going to live working for someone else and living in that systemic structure of whatever they've created. And I think that's similar for talking oneself out of the mental health system. I was living according to that system, but in creating other context, I was able to talk myself out of that, and then what can I design through my own language energetics moving forward? And I was thinking about how if addiction is a brain disease, then society is the cause of it. And I feel like by saying it's a mental illness, it's like saying, sorry, we don't have time to listen to you, so take this pill and you won't feel like saying much anymore, and you'll probably forget what you wanted to say. And I was thinking about how a teacher in high school once told me that we learn best by teaching. So after she would teach us something, she would get us to teach that to the person beside us. And I was thinking about how teaching is kind of like sharing and getting a response. So can we learn by sharing? Because sharing in a way is teaching, because we teach what we share. And I was thinking about how I'm harvesting my map consciousness experience after the fact. And those experiences are still with me, just like past memories. So it's still the past. And life isn't memories, and life isn't in these memories, even if they are these altered states experiences. But instead of using past thoughts as a map, it's using some of these past altered states as a map. But I still feel like that's still not entering the moment. I still haven't entered the moment, and I don't feel like that'll happen until that mixture of the me is gone, and even the recollections of the past map consciousness experiences. And yesterday when I was out for a walk, I was walking and moving, and I was noticing everything move. And I was seeing that as I was holding this framework of movement instead of time, everything felt a little bit different. And in the state of map consciousness, I've had the experience where I can't keep track of time. And I feel like this whole concept or sensation of movement becomes more primary than actual time. So there's this time ticking by on a clock, but when we're with movement, it adds a whole different dimensionality to the passage of time. When we feel it as all of this different movement within us and around us, and in reference to us and relative to us. And I wonder if there's some energy that leads to eternity and sort of buys time and transcends time. And is that something to do with moving one's identification to sensing movement instead of time? Or maybe not instead, but in favor of. And I was also energizing that meaning changes our perception of time. So if we were in contact with infinite meaning, we might actually be in contact with eternity. What are the eternal meanings of eternity? And we need to be able to read the space of map consciousness, which has more to do with this movement than time. If we're putting our senses on this whole movement of reality in the world and the cosmos, and not so much on time, as in clock time or time as the past, then we're moving in a different dimension. And we're learning how to read that dimension and speak as that dimension and be that dimension and write as that dimension. And it seems that those of us that see that dimension, see it for ourselves, are called crazy. And those who just believe and repeat are called sane. So it seems that parrots don't get pathologized. And can there be a moment-to-moment seeing and understanding? There's no time for beliefs, as beliefs are time. And I talked about wondering if I can really invite that voice, or that energy that gives voice to that other dimension, to really come in and take over. If I can see movement instead of time, it's eternity. What if we become blind to time? To the past, to the future, especially psychologically. And it seems like it's no wonder in map consciousness we can't keep track of time, because we're tracking something else. We're tracking a movement of meaning and beauty. So it seems like meaning and beauty and the perception of that give a different sense orientation of time and space and movement and all of that, and even the laws of physics and gravity. I have a feeling that we would cooperate if our language didn't create the division between thinker and thought. Why does this energy that arises, that we energize, get split into thinker and thought, and that split causes identification by virtue of the split, but there's neither an identifier or something to identify with? And in all my conversation with myself, I'm still not against the system. I don't like that there's no real paths out of it and support to get out of it if one wants to. And I feel like in map consciousness, and if we can become omnipolar and transconscious, the brain becomes an amplifier instead of a limiter. And we need some brains to become amplifiers, because there's too many brains out there that are limiters. And this will consume the earth. So it seems to be creating new functionality and a new neurotribe to bring some kind of balance.